Good evening. Tonight's class, Gimel Tammuz, Tavshin Samach Tes, the 3rd of Tammuz, 5769. The needle and the water, the turbulent journey of a soul, resurrection on 4 levels: the body, the animal soul, the rational soul, and the divine soul. This class is dedicated to one of the shluchim, one of the ambassadors of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak ben Cyril, for a refuah shleima and a refuah kreva, for a complete and speedy recovery. B'chol ramach evara v'shasa gidov, and may he enjoy arichis yomim v'shanim tovus, many, many long, happy, healthy, and prosperous years together with his beloved family, b'toiv hanira v'hanigla. And may tonight's class, uniting Jews the world over in the study of Torah, increase the flow of Hashem's blessings to him and his family for a complete and speedy recovery, b'karev mamish, amen, kain, yehi ratzon. Tonight, Gimel Tammuz, I chose to examine and study inside 2 fascinating letters written by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the years of 1944 and 1945. They were written in connection and in the aftermath of the passing of his own father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, who passed away in the summer of 1944. And in connection with his passing, the Rebbe wrote both of these letters. Under your video, you have a curriculum, a PDF, which you can open up to follow inside the text of these letters, which are published today in the 2nd volume of the Igros Kodesh, the letters of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And you can look inside to follow these letters inside. According to the Jewish custom, there is a tradition that on the day of a yahrzeit, we study Mishnayos. And there are 2 chapters that are particularly studied, the 24th chapter of Tractate Kalim and the 7th chapter of Tractate Mikvahs. Each Mishnah in the 7th chapter of Mikvahs concludes with the word Tahira, pure. The first letter that we examine tonight is an explanation on the last Mishnah of the 7th chapter of Tractate Mikvahs, traditionally studied on a yahrzeit. Let us look inside. Baruch Hashem Chav Gimel Tevis Tavshin Hey. The letter is written the 23rd day of Tevis, 1945 in Brooklyn. It's addressed to Kvoid Harha Chavach Yeshirei Elokim Nichbet V'nai L'chuli Moreno Rav Chanoich Hendel Sheyichya Havlin. At the time, Reb Hendel Havlin was the dean. He ran the yeshiva of Teiras Emes in the city of Jerusalem, the Chabad yeshiva Teiras Emes in Yerushalayim, and this letter is addressed to him. Lo yanisi zezman al michtavov, the Lubavitcher Rebbe writes. For a while I haven't answered his letters. V'chein oid michtavim, I also did not respond to other letters. Mipnei ha'asen asher karani b'ptiras adoni avi moiri v'Rabbi hareini kaparas mishkavai. Because of the tragedy which struck me with the passing of my father and my teacher. As I said, the Rebbe's father passed away just a few months earlier, on the 20th of 1944. And therefore I did not respond to your letters and to other people's letters. The Rebbe continues, V'yesh loymar, Masha shamati me'adoni avi moiri v'Rabbi hareini kaparas mishkavai. Here I want to share an insight which I heard from my father of blessed memory. The Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, was the chief rabbi of the Ukrainian city Yekaterinoslav, or the way the name was changed after the Russian Revolution from Yekaterinoslav to Dnipropetrovsk. And for many years he served as the rabbi there. He was a great halachic authority as well as a tremendous Kabbalist and mystic. And his mastery of all segments of Torah literature, both the halachic as well as the esoteric, was simply extraordinary. In 1939, he was arrested by the Communist Party, exiled to Kazakhstan, and he died there in middle of the Second World War, the 20th of 1944, Chaf Av Tavshin Dalet, in a city called Alma-Ata in Kazakhstan, after an illness. And a few days later, his son, his oldest son, the Rebbe, who was in New York, heard the news of his father's passing. This letter he writes a few months afterwards. And he shares here an insight which I heard from my father, I am going to add footnotes and references to the insight I heard from my father. In the last Mishnah, the end of the 7th chapter of Mikvayis, there the Mishnah says these words: if a needle is placed on the step leading down to the mikveh water, and a person passes a wave over the needle becomes ritually pure. Which means this: machat is a needle, and sometimes a needle can become tameh, ritually defiled, impure. And in order to purify it, it needs to be submerged in a mikveh, in a ritual bath of cleansing water, where one puts in the needle and the needle becomes tired, it becomes pure. The problem, of course, is a needle is so small, you don't just want to drop it in the mikveh or even put it in the mikveh, because it will usually get lost and you won't find the needle. So commonly what's done is the machat, the needle, is placed al mailas hamayra, on a step on top of the mikveh. Mayra means a pit. And in Mishnayos, in the times of the Mishnah, often there were various mayras, there were various caves and pits which were used as a mikveh, which has to be made from natural rainwater or from water that is processed and cleaned but has to come in contact with rainwater, as most mikvehs today. The mikveh, the mayra, the pit has steps going up. So machat shenisuna al mailas hamayra. You place the needle al mailas hamayra on a step leading down to the mikveh on an upper step. But there's no water there. It's a step going down to the water. So haya moilech umevi b'mayim. The person with his hand is moilech. He leads the water in one direction. And mevi, he brings back the water in the other direction. Kivan sha'aver aleh hagal. Once a wave, gal means a wave, once a wave of the mikveh water passes over the needle, tahira, the needle is pure. Now it's known that every single law in Torah is not just a physical law describing a physical situation, but also reflects a spiritual idea, a metaphysical concept, one which also has ramifications emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually in a person's life. Judaism has two dimensions, two parts. There is what we call the nigla, the revealed dimension of Judaism, which deals with the concrete laws and mitzvahs of Torah. And then there is the nister, the esoteric, Kabbalistic and Hasidic dimension, which explores the inner, spiritual dimensions behind every story, mitzvah, and law. And here, the Lubavitcher Rebbe shares the spiritual metaphysical interpretation to this halachic legality concerning the needle in the mikveh water. And he begins to explain. Ki harbe kinuyim l'neshama. There are many different names given to a soul. V'al shem ma'aseha nikras. The soul is called based on its actions. The Midrash says concerning God, God says, Lefi masay ani nikra. I have different names based on my activities at a particular moment. So he says the soul has different names, and some of the names are given to it based on its actions, on its achievements. Umeikre tachlis yiridasa. One of the primary goals and objectives of the descent of the soul from heaven down to this earth to live its life here on the earthly planet, one of its main and primary objectives, hu lechaber hatachten b'yoser be'elyon b'yoser, is to link, to connect, and to create integration between the lowest reality with the highest reality. This is the unique mission of a soul, of a neshama. Only a soul is the entity which can create a synthesis and an integration between the lowest, most mundane reality and the highest, most refined and sublime reality. Shalachein, he says in parentheses, therefore, nishtana yitziras gufa adam chuli, u'k'may shekasav b'drushei, divrei elekim chayim dibur amaschel zeh b'toira ur v'yoid. Referencing to Hasidic discourses in the book of Torah Ur, written by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, which begin with the words, Lahavin hatam shenishtana yitziras gufa adam, to understand the reason why in the story of creation in Genesis, the story of the creation of the human body differs from the story of the creation of all other living organisms in the 6 days of creation. All of the animals which God created, He created the body together with the consciousness, the body together with the soul. When God created fish, or created mammals, created insects, or created domesticated or undomesticated animals, everything God created, trees, vegetation, produce, He created the outer layer, the outer crust, the physical body, together with the inner spiritual consciousness, the life force of the tree or the life force of the animal. The only exception is the human being. When it came to the human being, first God created a body devoid of a soul, a dead body, earth from the sand, Afar min Adam, and then afterwards God infused a nefesh chaya, a living soul, into the human body. Why? So the Hasidic masters explain in Torah and other books, because the function of the human being, of the human soul, is to come down and to give meaning and purpose and to sublimate the lowest inanimate matter. Only the soul, which comes from the highest place, can ultimately come down and reach into the lowest matter. And therefore the animal body was already created with a soul, so it's a living body. The human soul, however, comes into contact first with a corpse that is devoid of any consciousness, of any vitality, demonstrating the function of the soul to elevate and give purpose and dignity to the lowest elements of reality. V'zehu pu'ulas machat. And this is the function of a needle. What's the objective of a needle? A needle is used to sew distinct parts of a garment together. Your button of your garment falls off, so you want to sew back your button. So we take the needle, and with the needle we connect the button which is detached to the garment. Shehu atoifer u'mechaber. The soul now, we said that the main objective of the soul is to connect, to link, to integrate. So the soul is called the needle. Shehu atoifer u'mechaber, because the soul is that reality which sews and connects. Sheyiyah hagilui lamata kamay lamayla. That the revelation down here should be in the same way that the revelation is lamayla in the supernal realities. Just as in the higher states of consciousness, there is a more refined perspective. There is an appreciation and a perception of the inherent spiritual divine reality, which is at the core of all of existence. The soul was given the function to serve as the needle and be the bridge to link and interlace and connect the highest reality with the lowest reality, to reveal godliness and meaningfulness within this lowly world. Which the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, discusses in his magnum opus in the Likutei Torah in this week's portion in Korach, at the discourse which begins Vayikach Korach at the end of the discourse. So since we give the soul a name based on its actions, one of its primary actions and achievements is to serve as a needle. So therefore, when the Mishnah talks about a needle, it's referring, of course, also to the soul, which is a machat. And as a machat, as a needle, it serves as the bridge which connects and which integrates the higher realities and the lower realities. Interestingly, as a parenthesis in brackets, I once heard from the Rebbe at a talk he gave on his father's yahrzeit, the 20th of Av, 1989, Tavshin Mem Tes, and he also quoted then his father, explaining another connection to the needle. The needle has two sides. On one side of the needle you have a hole, a little tiny hole through which you put the thread. The thread goes into that hole. And of course, on the other side of the needle, you have the sharp edge of the needle, which perforates, which makes the hole in the garment. And then on the other side, you have the hole through which the thread comes through, and that's how you sew the two pieces together. A soul, in order to create integration and unity in the world, must also have these two components. The needle has to have two components. On one hand, the soul must have a certain strength of character, a confidence and a determination represented by the sharp edge of the needle to be able to confront the materialistic ego of the world and to be able to perforate it. Not to succumb to the pressures of the world and to be able to challenge it and ultimately reveal its inner spirituality, you have to have a strength. On the other hand, on the other side, the soul also has to have a hole, which represents an emptiness, a sense of humility, a sense of a lack of arrogance or pompousness. And through that hole, through that space of humility, a thread comes through. That thread is represented Kabbalistically known as the kav, the chut, the thread, the divine ray which permeates the world, represented by the tzitzis, the strands of tzitzis, which is like the thread going through a needle. Tzitzis is the mitzvah which reminds us of all the mitzvahs. In other words, it encapsulates all of the mitzvahs, because the mitzvahs are the tool. They are the instrument through which we sew up and we heal a fragmented world, through which we introduce unity and harmony into a disparate and broken and fragmented world, to unite the source of the world with the outer layer of the world. So the Jewish soul is the bridge created and sent down to heal a fragmented world and to bring oneness where there's a lot of brokenness, to serve as a needle and sew God to the world and the world to God, that they become one. This is the needle. The Rebbe continues. How can the soul reach this level? This brings the soul to a state which is far greater and higher than the place it was even before it came down to this world. Before it came down to this world, the soul was a spiritual entity living in a spiritual cocoon, so to speak, in the divine bosom. Now when it comes down to this world and it brings down the revelation into this world, it reaches a far greater and deeper state than it was before it was created. How does the soul reach this space? And how does the soul accomplish this mission? To really serve as a needle and create integration between paradoxes. For this, the soul must be submerged in water. Mayim rabim, in the multitudes of waters, shehem befrat hatirdes desman hagolus, which specifically represents the stress and the anxiety in a time of exile. Nizboyer ba'aruche b'dibur amaschil mayim rabim teira parshas noyach b'lekut teira l'gimel parshi sham v'yoyt. The concept of mayim rabim, the multitudes of waters, is taken from a verse in the Song of Songs in Shir Hashirim, where King Solomon says, mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechabes es ha'ava. The multitudes of waters cannot extinguish the love. Unaharais lo yishtafua, and the rivers will not drown the love. There is a love in the human heart which even tsunamis of water, representing the pressures of life, the stress of life, the anxiety that people confront in life, it cannot extinguish the inner hidden love. But for the soul to reach its ultimate mission and to reach its objective, to serve as the needle which creates integration, it must go in. It must be submerged in the mayim rabim, which represent the stress and the overwhelming qualities that exist in this world which can drown us, a tsunami of water waves. And it's within working in this context that the soul's inner dignity and glow can come to the fore to serve as the bridge which sews together God and the world. Although this is a tremendous descent for the soul, bira mikta, it must descend into a deep pit. This also is a term in Talmud in Chagiga Daf Hey, Chagiga page 5. Machat sunai milas hamayra, the needle goes into a pit. Mayra, because and nonetheless, utzorich aliyah. The descent is only for the sake of a tremendous elevation. Milas hamayra. It's on the step, it's on the higher step of the pit. You're not just sending the soul into a dark, lowly pit where it can fall and lose its dignity. Yes, the soul is submerged in a very chaotic, often stressful and overwhelming reality. But there, the soul's mission is to elevate, to sublimate, to sew together the world and God, and therefore to elevate itself too. Milas hamayra. It comes up from the pit. Va'ofen hatvila. And how does the soul have to operate within these multitudes of waters? Moilech umevi. Moilech umevi means you take the wave of water and you put it over the needle, and maybe you bring it back. Representing spiritually Ratzoi v'Shoiv. The soul operates on two levels of consciousness in two modes. Ratzoi is yearning, Shuv is returning. Ratzoi is tension, Shuv is resolution. Ratzoi is the anxiety of the soul, its lack of complacency with the status quo. It asks itself, what am I doing here? Get me out of here, I want to quit. And then it returns with commitment and resolve, knowing that here lay its mission. It is an ambassador of the highest place to bring the message of God into the lowest reality. This is a terminology of the Zohar of the Rabbi. It does not exist on one leg, on one foot, on one mode. Either tension, running away, or shuv, just accepting the reality and being relaxed. There are two elements. There's moilech and there's mevi. If the soul is to be successful in its mission, it comes down into the water, it has to operate on both levels. On one level, there has to be moilech, which is the water takes the soul forward, the soul reaches out, it wants to return to its source. On the other hand, mevi, you bring the water back, which represents the fact that the soul accepts its place and comes back to make peace with its present condition. Hein ba'avodas haTorah mitzvahs. This is necessary both in regard to the work of Torah and mitzvahs, both of these levels, v'hein binyanei olam hazeh, as well as the way it deals with this world. Also on both of these levels, there is the tension, the striving to change things, to transform things, not to be content with the way things are, not to be satisfied, and therefore it can lead to paralysis and smugness. On the other hand, not a tension which burns you up and just doesn't allow you to function, but the ability to be able to come back and make peace with where you are and appreciate that where you are is where you're supposed to be. And that then leads you to a deeper tension, which then leads you to a deeper resolution. When the soul operates on both of these modes, there is then a demonstration that the person is not enslaved to the natural inclinations of his body. Al derech mashakasu b'Torah biyum rayim rabim, the parshas told us Perek Dalet, v'ayin gam kein Rambam il Chizdeis Perek Aleph Beis u'Bnei Sekelim. This is similar to a concept the Alter Rebbe explains in his book Torah in parshas told us in the explanation to the discourse Mayim Rabim in the 4th chapter, and see also Rambam il Chizdeis in the first 2 chapters. There the Alter Rebbe explains at length that sometimes if a person serves God only in one dimension, it may be that this dimension comes easy to the person because this is the way his or her chemical and genetic makeup is defined, and therefore the person operates in one mode. How do we know that the person touched transcendence and the person transcended his or her subjugation to the nature of the body? Because ultimately the purpose in life is not just to live within our own parameters, but to challenge ourselves and to grow and to touch the divine through transcending our ego and our natural proclivities. It's within the double movements of Ratzoi and Shoiv, running and returning, where we discover the point of transcendence, that the soul is not just here, the human being is not just here to serve himself, and therefore completely defined by the mode he's comfortable with, but he has the courage to challenge his comfort zone and realize that sometimes you have to ask not what God can do for you. You have to ask what you can do for God. And sometimes God wants ratzoi, for you to ascend, and sometimes he wants shuv, for you to return and come back and make peace with the earth. Kivan sha'avar aleh hagal. Once the wave passes over the needle, miloshoin kol mishbarecha v'galecha alai avaru. That verse in Tehillim, Psalms 42. Kol mishbarecha v'galecha, all of your tsunamis and waves have passed right over me. V'ayin gamken yevama is kuf chaf aleph amid aleph, where the Talmud discusses the two stories of Rabbi Akiva and the story of Reb Meir in the ocean with the waves. Kivan shavar ala agal. The soul is a needle. The soul is sent down to the Meira, to the pit, to come up to the step of the Meira. The soul operates on two levels, Meilech Mevi, submerged in the chaos of the world, in the dysfunction of a fragmental, difficult world. Kivan shavar ala hagal. When the wave goes over the soul, over the needle has become submerged in the water. Tahira. The soul is not pure. This is the comfort to a neshama. Person comes down to this world, and often we face different challenges. And sometimes just to wake up in the morning is a difficult challenge, and to make ends meet, and to deal with the various emotional, psychological, physical, financial, spiritual, that every soul challenges in the mayim rabim, in the waters of the world. Comes the Rebbe and explains in the name of his father, Kivan shavar aleh agal, the wave has to go over the soul. The soul feels that it's drowned in the water, and that's the moment when it becomes the needle, and it can sew together the highest and the lowest and reveal that really there's oneness, and God is everywhere, and there's the energy of godliness in every reality. Tahira, she becomes pure. The level of purity is explained in Likutei Torah, in this particular Maimer in Shmini Atzeres, Hashem li ba'izri, which we say in Hallel. The 5th chapter, what is the level of purity? That discourse discusses at length what is Tahira, and he quotes from that discourse in Likutei Torah, "V'gam ki b'haneshama shayach gamkin b'chinezu chuli ayin sham." Look there where the Alter Rebbe says that also by the soul you have this level of Tahira. Alter Rebbe explains there at length, very briefly, that the soul itself is filled with paradoxes, because on one hand, the shama shenasata bi Tahiri, we say in the morning prayers. The soul is pure, it comes from the highest levels of purity, and then it evolves and it comes down all the way till it's enclosed in physical layers of a concrete and crass body, and it's within the work in the body that it reaches its highest level of tahira, its highest level of purity. V'yesh loymar, the Lubavitcher Rebbe adds, v'yesh loymar, one can say, shebefratu be'elu shaholchu begoyla, gal achar goyla. If this is true about every needle, if it's true about every soul which comes down into exile, which comes down into this world, especially in the time of exile, it's especially true about those souls that were not only present in the general exile from the Holy Land after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, but within exile itself, they were exiled once again. Gal means a wave. It also comes from the word golos, legalois, exile. Kivan shavar aleh hagal. Once exile passes over the needle. Those who didn't only go into exile once, they went into exile twice. And obviously he's referring here to the tragic story of his own father, who as a result of his work for Yiddishkeit in the Soviet Union, he was arrested and tortured and then exiled, where he passed away. Laksa bekeflayim, the terminology of the Medrash, she was struck doubly, a double exile. Here, the tahira, the purity, is far deeper, far greater. Based on what the sages say in Bereshit Rabbah, Seif Parsha Mem Dalet, Shebirer Avraham Malchiyos v'Kalahaven. The Medrash says that God gave Abraham a choice, what he wants for his children to purify themselves, either Gehenna, purgatory, or Shibud Malchiyos, the enslavement to the various empires, and Abraham chose Shibud Malchiyos as a substitute for the cleansing of Gehenna. These are the Mayim Rabbim, the Shibud Malchiyos. So he says, somebody who went into exile after exile as a result of Shibud Malchiyos, of the subjugation of the nations of the world. This is the substitute of Gehenna. These are the Mayim Rabbim, which allow a deeper purity of the soul. Shescharim, their reward is Nechama B'Keflayim. As the Medrash says, Luxa, it says Nachamu, Nachamu Ami twice. Comfort, comfort my nation. So the Medrash says, Luxa B'Keflayim, she was struck doubly, and therefore Nechama B'Keflayim, she's comfort also doubly. In his Bible, the B'Ramaschel says, Osis Seif Siv Gimel, the B'Ramaschel Nachamu, Reish Samachtes, Eter, Tarav, Va'oid, explained in these various discourses. And the Rebbe concludes, B'Birches La'alter L'Tshuva La'alter L'Geula, with the blessings for repentance now, redemption now, and signs his name. And thus, it is through the Gal, it is through the wave, through which the neshama reaches its ultimate purpose, its ultimate destiny, its ultimate purity, as the needle which sews together and integrates the highest reality and the lowest reality. Here we come to a second letter, written a very short time after his father's passing. And you have it again in your curriculum under the video, below the first letter. And again, we'll read it inside. Baruch Hashem ben kisei la'aser Tafshin Hei. This letter was written in the beginning of the year of Tafshin Hei, 1944. Ben kisei la'aser, in the beginning of the year, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it's addressed to Kvoid ha'avrich ha'metzuyin v'asek v'chaz d'Yisrael Elokim v'chuli hatamim This letter is addressed to Reb Ze'ev Wolf, Reb Velvel Gringlas, who lived then and still lives today in Montreal, soll gesund sein. Shalom u'bracha, peace and blessing. B'maynal michtave michtav nichum. In response to his letter, a letter of comfort, of solace. He wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe shortly after his father's passing, to comfort him on his devastating loss. And you see that this passing was 20th of Av, and this letter was written a little more than a month later, around 6 weeks later. And the Rebbe writes to him, among other things in the beginning of the letter, I enjoyed what he wrote in his letter about the resurrection of the dead on different levels. Rabbi Gringlas, Reb Wolf Gringlas, wrote in his letter to the Rebbe, he wrote this. He said that I hope that in your fruitful work in the organization of Machane Yisrael, Merkez L'Inyonei Chinuch, where the Lubavitcher Rebbe worked, and the other elements of the work of your father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, with the objective of resurrecting the dead spiritually, those people who lack the vitality and the life which comes through the study of Chassidus, and you attempt to resurrect them and give them life. So with this work, you yourself will find comfort, and you will not know of any sorrow. This, the Lubavitcher Rebbe responds to. I enjoyed what you wrote in your letter about resurrection on different levels. However, according to my humble opinion, what was missing in your letter is the connection and the evolution from one form of work to another form of work. We have to add a little spices to fix up the flaw, the void in your letter. And here we have to understand, as a preface, a fundamental principle which would be developed in the Lubavitcher Rebbe's teachings over the years, namely, every detail and component of every individual's life contains layers and layers of spiritual significance and is part of a much larger and deeper story. Every component of life, if looked into, if examined deeply, tells a larger story. And what the Lubavitcher Rebbe is going to do in this letter is, he's going to analyze the four functions, the four jobs which his father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, gave him when he arrived to the United States of America. The Rebbe gave him four jobs, and he's going to demonstrate how at the core of these four jobs lie the work of Tchiyas HaMesim, of bringing life where there is an absence of life. So Rabbi Greenglass just said, in your work of resurrecting the spiritually not so living, the spiritually dead, you should find comfort. And he mentioned two organizations. The Rebbe says you're missing the whole picture, you're missing the connection. Here he's going to give him the whole picture. Vuhu, it's this. Inyan ha-missa b'chlal hu. The concept of death is man de nafil medarge ikri mis. Somebody who falls down from his level is called dead. Keinu b'lekut Torah de b'ramaschel zeis chukas soif siv beizu b'chama duchti. This is a terminology quoted in Lekut Torah. Somebody who is on a particular level and he or she falls from that level, that is a form of death. The Rebbe says, I haven't found yet this exact term. Now is not the time to search. In Zohar, quoted in other works of the Arizal of Rabbi Isaac Luria, the terminology is a little different. The terms employed are a bit different. There it says, somebody who falls down from his original level where he was, we can call this state death. A little bit different, the same concept, but a little different. So what is death? Death is not only physical death, God forbid. The soul leaves the body. Death exists on many different dimensions and many different worlds. When a person is in a particular state, this is your position, this is your place, and you fall from that place, it's a form of absence of life. V'hinei, now, and here let me give an introduction. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe gave his son-in-law, when he arrived to the United States in June 1941, he appointed him to four positions. Number one, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was the chairman of a corporation founded by his father-in-law called Kahas. Kahas was and is the publishing arm of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, responsible to publish all of the Hasidic works of all of the Lubavitcher Rebbes. And yet before, from the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid of Mizrich, the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, the Maharash, the Rebbe Rashab, and the 6th and the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe. This was the first job of the Rebbe. The second, his father appointed him as the chairman of an organization he created called Merkez Le'inyonei Chinuch, a center for education, which made it its responsibility to dedicate itself to the education of Jews and Jewish children in the United States and the world over. Merkez Le'inyonei Chinuch, the Center for Education. A third organization which he appointed his son-in-law, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as chairman of, was a corporation called Machane Yisrael, which literally means the camp of Israel. And its function was and is outreach, to reach out to Jews and bring them into the camp of the Jewish people to help them restore their lives and give them their righteous place within the structure of Knesset Yisrael of the Jewish people, helping them come closer to Yiddishkeit and re-embrace the Torah. The third job he gave his son-in-law, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, was Chevre Kadisha, which is, of course, the holy society dealing with the burial of those who passed on. Comes the Rebbe and is explaining to Rabbi Greenglass, you wrote to me in my letter that with my work in these organizations to help resurrect those who are not so alive without the vitality of Chassidus, I should find comfort, but you were missing the full picture and the connection. Here he's going to demonstrate how these four forms of work essentially constitute four types of Tchiyas HaMesim, resurrection of the dead, based on understanding that death is everybody who falls down from his level. V'hinei b'yadam yesh, in each person, there are four dimensions. Aleph, there's Nefesh HaLekis, the divine soul. Beis, Nefesh HaSichlis, the rational soul. Gimel, Nefesh HaBaham, is the animal consciousness. Daled Guf, the body. Each person, every Jew, constitutes of four dimensions. We have four parts. Number one, we have a divine consciousness. Divine consciousness is the peace of God within every Jew, which allows you actually to experience godliness. There is a divine component within the Jew. Number two, Nefesh HaSichlis, which is the rational soul. It's our ability to understand things, to analyze things intellectually, and to search for the truth of things. The third element is Nefesh HaBahamis. We have an animal within us, which makes us similar to the zoological species. There's an animal within us which is concerned with one thing: self-preservation and self-gratification. And then there's the fourth component, the physical body. And they represent within the person himself those four categories of the macrocosm: domim, tzomeach, chaimedaber, the inanimate, the vegetative, the animal, and the human. The inanimate is compared to the body, the vegetative is compared to the animal soul, the animal is compared to the rational soul, and the speaking, the human, is compared to the divine soul. Now, each one of these four components can experience death. They can experience life, and they can experience the absence of life. How do they experience the absence of life? By falling, by losing their identity, by forfeiting who they really are, and ceasing to be the people, the person, and representing that force, that truth that they are supposed to represent. And when they lose that, when they forfeit that, that's a form of death. Number one, Aleph. First, the divine soul. Nefesh Elokis, the divine soul, Madregasa, her level, her state of being is Chelek Eleika Mimal Mamash. She is literally a fragment of the divine, a piece of God, as it were. V'im naflu mimadregezu, and if she falls down from this state, she'eina beratzil izdabek belakus, she doesn't experience the yearning, the inspiration, the vitality, and the desire to connect and to cleave with godliness. Nikra mis. This is a form of death. The divine soul is called dead. What's the element of death? The element of death is, it's not itself. It's not functioning. It's not alive. When the divine soul functions, the human being is inspired with a yearning to be divine, to be godly, because it's really a fragment of God. It's like a son to a father or to a mother. You come from your father and your mother, so there's a natural love. And when the soul doesn't feel that craving, that yearning to be divine, to be godly, it's dead. Va'etzel is what's the advice? How do we create resurrection for a divine soul? Limud v'izbainenus v'anhaga al pitoidas dach al pitoidas divrei Elokim chayim. To learn, to contemplate, meditate, and to behave based on the teachings of the words of the living God, referring to the teachings of Chassidus, which the discourses and the teachings of Chassidus help the soul access its inner life, its inner function, its inner essence, and reawaken what the soul is. So my first job, so to speak, what is it? Chairman of Kahas, to publish and produce and teach the discourses and the teachings of Chassidus, comes to resurrect the divine soul. Next, Beis, Nefesh HaSichlis. What is the mission statement of the rational soul? In Yana, her function is lahavin es hanefesh habahamis ayidei seichel u'moichin eich li'isnai b'mideisa. To explain to the animal soul through intellect and understanding how she should operate and behave with her natural emotions. The animal soul has very intense emotions, habits, instincts, inclinations. It gravitates to certain things and it abstains from others. But it's an animal. It needs direction. It needs guidance. It needs navigation. So the rational soul helps the animal soul control itself, discipline itself, refine itself, using its mind, its lucid mind, to clarify, reality. It's not the divine soul. The divine soul is the experience of the divine. The rational soul works with the intellectual prowess. It can explain the animal soul. What is right and what is wrong, what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, and it can help it control itself. V'hinei hakotin, now a child, heim b'shanim v'heim b'deya, either chronologically, a child in years, or sometimes you may be an adult in years, but you're a child in your state of mind. You're not fully developed, you're immature. Midoisav b'tkifas v'sichle b'katnos. A child's emotions are usually very intense, and his maturity level, his intellect is usually still underdeveloped. If the rational soul is persuaded and pulled after the cravings of the animal soul, afilu shal heter, even if they're permissible cravings, but they're not meaningful, kebehema, so that the person is like an animal. So the rational soul now fell down from its level, from what it's supposed to be, from its calling in life, and it's dead. So here again, what is death for the rational soul? It's not like death for the godly soul. Death for the godly soul is it doesn't experience a geschmack, a craving in godliness. The rational soul, what happens is, it doesn't function anymore with intellect. Instead of being the master and guiding the animal soul, it becomes a nachschlepper, becomes a shmata for the animal soul. And this is the difference between a child and an adult. A child's animal soul is fully developed. A child's emotions are very, very intense. And the job of the adult is to help the child refine his character, to educate the child, to explain the child what is important in life, what is not so important in life, not to judge the child, but to elevate and educate and refine the child. And that's the function of the rational soul with the animal soul, which is like a child. But sometimes the person remains a child. And the rational soul, instead of being a mentor, becomes a disciple. And it's death. What do you need now? Now we need education to help the child reestablish his life based on appropriate conduct and behavior. So the second job the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, gave his son-in-law, the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe, was chairman of Merkez L'Inyanei Chinuch. Here too, it's to create Tchiyas HaMesim, resurrection of a rational soul which often dies. And the person needs education to be able to refine himself using the supremacy of intellect over moods, instincts, addictions, and habits. We all have addictions. We all have habits. We all have natural instincts. We all have cravings. And here we have to use our mind, our seichel, to elevate them, or at least to discipline them and control them. And when we don't, our rational soul forfeits its identity, it's dead. Now you need Merkez L'Inyanei Chinuch. Gimel, the third, Nefesh HaBahamas. Now you have the animal soul. Tzorich liyas mitzad atzma al kol ponim kebehemis. V'chayes. She'enim mishadim es tafkidam. The animal soul on its own should be at least like regular animals in the zoo and in the jungles and in the forests, which never change their function. God creates a certain program. He programs the animals a certain way, and whatever they do, they never go astray from the DNA and from the composition, from the genetic structure with which God created them. They follow precisely their program, never deviating from the way God made them. So what is an animal soul in a person too? At least that. Be like an animal. And follow at least the manual, the code, which your Creator wrote for you. We're not talking here about spirituality or even rationality, but follow the program. If the human animal soul does an Isser and transgresses the will of the Creator, here, so here the animal soul fell down from its level, and it's called dead. Even a regular animal has a certain code. It has a certain inner structure, and it follows it. The one who created her a specific way, and she never deviates. At least if our animal soul would do the same. But our animal soul sometimes decides, I'm not going to follow the manual. I will not follow the code. I will violate the code that was written for my behavior. This is something which even for the animal soul is a form of death. Rishayim b'chayim kriyim esim. Wicked people, even when they're alive, they're called dead. What's the solution? Till shal yedei chacha, through rebuke, chastisement, and his friend arouses him and inspires him. Nis'ayr l'tshuva. He gets aroused to repentance, to return, and to strengthen himself in the performance of Torah and mitzvahs, v'shav, and he returns l'machane Yisrael, to the camp of Israel. So the third function which the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe gave the Lubavitcher Rebbe, to be the chairman of Machane Yisrael outreach, represents Tchias HaMesim, resurrecting the animal soul, which when it falls, what does it mean it falls and it dies? It severs its relationship to Torah and mitzvahs. It doesn't follow God's blueprint for its life, and thus becoming inferior even to the animals in the street and the outside, the real animals, which never violate the will of their creator. The way they're programmed, that's the way they behave. Our animal soul has the power to violate, and Machane Yisrael brings it back to life. Dalet, the fourth, is guf, the body. The body in Yonei Keli Lahanefesh. What does it mean that a body is alive, it's functioning, it's a vessel, it's a container for the soul? And a healthy body, a living body, means that the body and the soul are in full connection and synchronization, and the life force of the soul flows through the body. If the relationship between the body and the soul is severed, the body falls down from its level, and this is literal death. This is not a form of death explained in the earlier three levels. This is literal death. The soul leaves the body is now on its own, it's lifeless. What's now the function? Those who now deal with a body that's not alive, the holy burial groups. What's their function? To organize everything, that the body should be ready for the resurrection of the dead. May it be speedily in our days. One of the 13 principles of faith is that one day there's going to be Tchias HaMesim, that everybody will come back to life. Why does Judaism confer and attribute so much dignity to the body even when it's dead? There are so many laws of how we have to deal with a body after it passes away, how it has to be buried and cleansed. Many, many details. Cremation is something absolutely forbidden in Judaism. Why the need? Why the obsession to take care and give so much dignity to a lifeless body? I mean, we know what happens to most bodies in the earth. The answer is the Chevra Kaddish have to prepare the body for Tchias HaMesim. It's going to come back to life. In fact, it says somewhere that the reason we bury the body is not just to put it back into the ground, but furthermore, it's like planting a seed. You plant a seed in the earth, in the ground. The seed rots, but after it rots, a tree can grow. The body is planted in the ground when it's buried. It rots. Most bodies rot. But then afterwards, from that decay, from that state of decay, the tree reemerges at Tchias HaMesim. What was the fourth position that the Rebbe received from a father-in-law? To be involved and the chairman of Chevra Kadisha, the Holy Burial Society, which prepares the body for the resurrection of the dead after the coming of Mashiach. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion here is the Rebbe is explaining to Reb Wolf Gringlas. He's saying, all our work, all my work that the Rebbe, that my father-in-law, the Rebbe has given me, can all boil down to these two words, Tchias HaMesim. To bring life to a place and to a person which is devoid of life. Or if we want to use the previous terminology, to serve as a needle which sews the world to its source of life. To bring vitality and to infuse consciousness and life into people and places that lack it. Whether it's a divine soul which is very sensitive and holy, but it experiences death. And through chassidus, kahos, it gets back its life. Or it's the rational soul which has the power to be rational and intellectually lucid and sane. And it loses its integrity and it dies, becoming consumed in the addictions or the habits of the animal soul. And here, we bring it back to life through chinuch, through education. This is the function of education. That the mind has supremacy over the heart. Merkez le'inyanei chinuch. Or the animal soul which dies when it deviates and it abandons the blueprint, the manual created for it by its engineer, its cosmic engineer God. And here we bring it back to life through Machane Yisrael, through outreach, allowing it to do tshuva and come back to the holy camp of Israel. Or the body, which sadly at times experiences literal death when the soul departs from the body. And here the Chevra Kadisha help the body experience Tchiyas HaMesim by dealing with it in a way that when the time comes speedily in our days, it can come back to life and be reunited with its soul at the time of Tchiyas HaMesim. And he concludes the letter, V'Hashem Yizbarach Yizakeinu b'mheira b'yameinu mamish, l'kiyam ha'yiyud bila ha'mavas l'netzach goymer, b'yayim ha'shlishi yikimenu v'nichya l'fonav. God should help us that speedily in our days we should merit the time when death will be swallowed up for eternity. On the third day he will raise you, and we will live in his presence, b'guf v'nefesh gam yachad, the body and the soul together as one. Good night.